Well, good morning, everyone. Let's get started. Thanks for joining the 8th Annual Ed Games Expo. This is the Building Capacity for EdTech Going Global discussion. I think we've got a great panel of folks lined up here today. As you join, if you don't mind, drop your name and title in the chat if you can, just so we can see who's on here today. My name is Kerry Esslinger. I'm with the U.S. Department of Commerce International Trade Administration in the Baltimore U.S. Export Assistance Center. I'm joined by my colleague Caroline Chung, Commercial Officer in our Northern Virginia U.S. Export Assistance Center. And I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's session. We have Mr. Tony Bloom, Executive Director, and Scott Eisenbrandt, Director of Engagement for the mEducation Alliance. The mEducation Alliance is a global convening body for development and donor agencies investing in EdTech in developing countries and provides a range of services to accelerate EdTech ecosystem building of EdTech innovations and innovators. Lisa Waters, Director Education at R&D at Benetech Labs, will be joining us. Benetech harnesses the power of software and data to empower communities and address some of the world's most challenging social problems. Matthew Uterbeck, co-founder of eKitabu, will be joining us today as well. eKitabu believes that the educational impact of books is the foundation to learning. Based on that principle, they innovate, designing with users and partners from the public and private sector to increase accessibility and lower the cost of content for quality education. And finally, we have Sue-In Lee, co-founder and CEO of Enuma. Enuma creates exceptional learning solutions that allow all children to gain confidence and independence while building foundational skills. And with that, I'll get started on my brief presentation. So the purpose of my presentation is to give you a handful of tools and services that you can access that are available from the federal government, from the Department of Commerce, as you're looking to expand your presence overseas. So next slide, please. So we work with US manufacturers and service providers of 51% US content to help grow their presence overseas. And what's behind that is the mission behind it is to grow and increase and support existing US jobs. Next slide, please. So we have field offices in nearly every US state. I'm located in the Maryland field office, which is in Baltimore. Caroline's located in our Northern Virginia office, but we have colleagues throughout the US. So no matter where your company is, there's a local USIAC, US Export Assistance Center, that's nearby that can assist. The orange balloons on this map represent where we have staff in a US embassy or attaché. And these offices are led by a senior commercial officer, typically overseeing a team of foreign nationals specializing in a number of different industries, including education, media, and entertainment, where our gaming sector falls. So that's over 80 different countries. The purple dots represent our partner agency, the US State Department. So you can see we cover the majority of the international markets. Next slide, please. In addition to the locations shown on the last slide, we have various teams from across the US and globally that focus on a particular industry. So this includes the media and entertainment, gaming sector, and the education teams that focus on these industries. And these teams serve as our de facto experts. We host a variety of seminars, webinars, trade missions, trade shows, and the like. In addition, we have staff in DC that focuses entirely on a given industry and are subject matter experts and folks that focus on a particular country. So we can tap their expertise as well. Next slide, please. So while I'm talking about our export services, we do a number of other things in commerce as well. We focus on policy, foreign direct investment, which is US companies coming in to invest in America. Our big seminar is next week. Imports, we cover imports as well and the like, but today I'm just going to focus on a handful of export services that we'll go over here that hopefully you'll find useful. Okay, next slide, please. So we work with companies from really the A to Z of exporting. So when we start out, we can work with a company to help them develop their export strategy. We can do this through our export tech program or just through general counseling. We can provide background checks on potential partners overseas. We provide matchmaking and trade missions. Counseling is available from our overseas staff. We can help promote products overseas. If there are questions regarding regulations and compliance, we have folks that can address that in trade shows and trade missions. Next slide, please. These are our general services. I'll go over most of them in the next few slides in more detail, but we can do an initial market check, which provides market intelligence, an international partner search, which can provide a list of potential partners, an international company profile, which is our background check, our gold key service, which is probably what we're best known for, which is our matchmaking service, our single company promotion, which is a promotion that's run through the embassy, and lastly, website globalization. And I'll talk about this because I don't have a slide for it. It's a relatively new service, but this is a search engine optimization report. So companies that come to us typically bring their web address and those of competitors. We can run an SEO report to look at keywords, and it's a very specific technical report, but also provides a general overview on best practices for how to design your website for a global audience. It's a very effective tool. Now, we're mandated by Congress to charge for our services, although our fees are relatively nominal, and they're adjusted according to SBA definitions of small, medium, and large companies. And most companies fall in the small range. Next slide, please. So when it comes to gathering market intelligence, we have a few tools. Our country commercial guides are prepared by most of our overseas posts. Posts are embassies, locations where we have staff. And these give a doing business in overview of a market, along with info on regulations, customs, investment climate, and the like. These are free online. We're currently working on a video game country commercial guide, which will focus on 12 different markets, the gaming industry in 12 different markets. That's the first year that we're doing that. That report's being polished up now, but will be available free online soon. The initial market check service that we do is essentially gauging feedback on a given market. So if a company comes to us and says, hey, we're interested in going to Tanzania, but we don't know if there's a market there for us in Tanzania or not, we haven't had any contact with anybody in country, we can reach out to our colleagues at the embassy or the attaché. They'll go out and survey a short list, maybe around 5 different participants in the market, engage feedback to a company's product or service. We'll then provide a report and come back to the company and say, we think this is a viable market, or we do not think this is a viable market for your product. An international company profile. This is our background check. So if a company is attending, let's say they're attending a trade show in Korea, and somebody comes by with a business card and says, we'd love to be your rep in Korea, but the company doesn't know anything about that particular Korean company, we can run a background check on that company. And essentially what that looks like is a typical Dun & Bradstreet type report of suppliers, creditors, and the like. In pre-COVID time, this meant that we would go and visit the company, interview CEOs, take pictures of their facilities, which is very important in some markets that you make sure you affirm the actual address, and come back with a report that identifies any potential red or yellow flags. Very effective tool. Next slide, please. And I should say we can only run background checks on companies. We do not run background checks on individuals. When it comes to matchmaking, this is probably what the commercial service, the ITA, is best known for, is our Gold Key program. So if a company comes to us, for example, and says, we know that Paraguay is an excellent market for us, we need to find a distributor there. We can reach out to our colleagues at the embassy, the attaché. They will go out and identify and vet a short list of prospects from 1 to 5. The US company would then fly in country. The embassy would host a meeting at the hotel, the embassy, the company's location, wherever appropriate. We would provide translation, transportation to the meetings, not flights or hotels, and give a briefing for the company. So we provide valuable face-to-face with potential partners. This is a very effective tool in certain markets. In the time of COVID, when we've had to really rule out face-to-face meetings, we've gone to what's called our International Partner Search plus virtual introductions, which is essentially the same thing as a Gold Key, but we're doing introductions virtually. We tend to tell people if you can meet folks face-to-face, that's really the most effective tool for building relationships with partners overseas. But these times, exceptions have to be made. Single company promotion. This is a service at a promotional event that we can offer out of the embassy or the ambassador's residence. It is a catered promotional event where the embassy will send out invites to a group of folks. So let's say a company says, hey, we would like to do a single company promotion in Thailand. We need to educate the market on our service. We can develop a list. We work with the company to develop an invite list. The invites go out with the gold eagle on it. There is a catered event at the, let's say, the ambassador's residence, and then the company has a chance to network and get up and give their presentation. So very effective tool in certain markets as well. Next slide, please. Trade shows, trade missions, we do a lot across many different industries. In the gaming industry, for example, we're typically at E3 and Gamescom. Usually our trade shows, if we're attending and we've got a booth there and a large presence, we'll typically invite our colleagues from overseas to sit down and meet with US companies. So US companies can get immediate market feedback just by making an appointment with one of our colleagues in the booth. Sometimes at larger shows, we may even invite US companies to join us in the booth. Trade Wins is our big mission overseas. This is typically led by the Secretary of Commerce. We do these once a year. We visit multiple markets. Dozens and dozens of US companies come with us. This is a very high profile, high media event. I believe this year Trade Wins is headed towards the Middle East, but that's not until later in the year. And we'll invite companies to come along, and the US companies that come along, they're essentially, each of them are receiving a Gold Key service in the market of their choice. And lastly, we do reverse missions. So we bring buyers into the US who are looking to source US goods. And that includes educational and gaming as well. Next event, or I'm sorry, next slide, please. And lastly, we have our Advocacy Center. So if a company is bidding on a foreign government tender, I say this out there, if you're ever bidding on a foreign government tender, you might reach out to us and let us know in advance. We can advocate on behalf of US companies. This is a free service, but we do need to vet each US company ahead of time. And what this can do essentially is level the playing field in case you have a foreign competitor that you suspect may have an unfair advantage. Perhaps there's financial incentives being offered, or a tender looks like it's written to spec for a foreign competitor. We can come in and help level the playing field. We cannot advocate on one US company over another, though. So if there are more than one US company competing on a foreign government tender, we will advocate for Buy US. This is a very effective tool and can influence and to counter the influence of some of our foreign competitor countries. Last slide, please. And so the last thing I mention is our partners. We work with a number of different partners, including Department of Education. But we also work with the SBA. So if you're ever in need of export working capital, we can direct you towards the right folks there. Exporter insurance available from the Exim Bank. But the other area I would say to make sure you're aware of is what incentives, what tools do your local economic development agencies, organizations, your local EDOs, what do they offer? For example, in the state of Maryland, Maryland offers travel grants, so reimbursing up to $5,000 for any company traveling overseas or participating in a foreign trade show. So there are very effective tools depending upon the state you're calling in from. There could be some cash that's available, some grants, some funding and the like. So I think that's enough out of me. I think I've given you a short overview of kind of what we do and hopefully some tools that you can keep in mind as you move forward. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Scott.
Great. Well, thanks, Carrie, and thank you for that overview. That was great. So hi everybody. I'm Scott Isbrandt. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the mEducation Alliance. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I don't have a deck, but my colleagues Nicole and Tony will populate the chat with a few web links as I kind of go through my overview of the mEducation Alliance. So for those of you who might not have heard of the Mobiles for Education Alliance, or mEducation Alliance for short, we've been around since 2010. We were established at USAID by Tony Bloom, who's on the call, our executive director. And currently we're an independent nonprofit. The mEducation Alliance is a unique convening platform that promotes collaboration and coordination between policymakers, investors, researchers, and EdTech practitioners alike. We have a special focus on low resource developing country contexts. We promote sustainable technology and education, basically to look at improving educational outcomes. The mEducation Alliance looks at how to best convene, communicate, and catalyze the global EdTech community through our platform. We also focus on EdTech ecosystem strengthening through our portfolio of activities. So I'd like to mention just a few briefly if I could, and then my colleagues can drop in a few links so you can check out our site. So first off, we have a youth initiative called Youth Digital Champions that focuses on promoting youth access to digital literacy skills training to advance community development efforts. We also have our Math Power initiative that focuses on inspiring young learners to engage with math through the use of game. We have a variety of channels that range from low tech to no tech distribution. Additionally, we have our premier learning and training platform that we call the Edtech Academy, which is geared towards EdTech policymakers, practitioners, and researchers. Our first course offering for the Edtech Academy will be our Digital Literacy 101 series, which is currently in production. We also produce a number of convening events of all sizes, from what we call an eCafe, which is a small, intimate setting, to our large symposium events, which can range up to 1,000 participants, as well as a range of communication products that all benefit the global EdTech community. Our Going Global event format, which I wanted to mention since it's rather pertinent to our discussion today, is specifically designed as a means to bring together a range of global actors in the interest of promoting an exchange of innovative ideas and matchmaking opportunities as well, between potential strategic funders and partners. We're especially interested in promoting global linkages between EdTech innovators and their innovations with this Going Global format. So I'd just like to quickly perhaps set the stage a bit today with a few framing questions for us to keep in mind during our panel discussion. So myself, I've worked in the field for a number of years, mainly in West Africa, co-creating EdTech products and solutions. So as we think about EdTech development in developing countries today, I have a few framing questions that I think we should reflect on that would be interesting for the discussion during the panel. Firstly, how do we ensure access and affordability of our products and services? What is the quality of digital literacy curriculum and games? How do we ensure that we're meeting the needs in a responsive way of digital curriculum and game development? By what measure do we measure success and impact? And perhaps most importantly for me, How do we ensure the self-sustainability of our efforts? Fee or free? How do we ensure that actors in local ecosystems who produce digital learning curricula get compensated for their efforts? So the developers, the writers, the graphic artists, the producers of the content, what model can we effectively build and test that ensures not just access and quality, but also a sustainable pathway to ensure self-sustaining revenue for the local ecosystem? So with that thought, I'll stop there and pass over to Tony.
Thank you, Scott. And thanks to Carrie and your colleague, Caroline, as well, for the opportunity to co-present with you. Carrie and Caroline, it's been terrific hearing about the services of your agency, and we look forward to deep dive collaboration with common interests. We also want to thank EdMets and all the organizers of the Ed Games Expo. We've been frequent participants at the Ed Games Expo, and we're delighted to be invited back in collaboration with the Department of Commerce. So it's my pleasure to reintroduce three innovators that the mEducation Alliance has had the great fortune of getting to know over several years, both in the context of previous engagement and initiative called the All Children Reading Grand Challenge, which Benetech and our colleagues from eKitabu are well known, and also Sunan and our colleagues that are Enuma in terms of the great work that they've done and the recognition with the Global Learning X Prize. I'm just going to give a little background about the organizations, but then just jumps immediately into inviting them to talk a little bit about themselves. So Benetech harnesses the power of software and data to empower communities and address some of the world's most challenging social problems. Along with technology for education, they're also developing programs to address employment, human rights, and poverty. Lisa, who's the director of education at the R&D lab at Benetech Labs, is joining us today. Lisa, thanks for joining us. We're fortunate to have Matthew Utterbeck, the co-founder of eKitabu. And eKitabu believes that the education impact of books is the foundation to learning. And based on that principle, they innovate designing with users and partners from the public and private sector to increase accessibility and lower the cost of content for quality education. Thanks for joining us, Matt. It's great to see you again.
Thank you.
And finally, Sunan Lee, the co-founder and CEO of Enuma. Enuma creates exceptional learning solutions that allow all children to gain confidence and independence while building foundational skills. The name Enuma comes from the word enumerate, or to name one by one, which underscores their commitment to every child's individual success. So we're going to open up for a little bit of Q&A here, and then allow for the audience to drop their questions into the chat as well. I provided a little bit of background about your respective institutions. Matt, I'm going to start with you. Anything else you want to tell us to stage set about the work that you've done with eKitabu, including maybe mention some of the countries that you're working? And then I'll ask the same question of Lisa and Sunan as well. So Matt, maybe start with you.
Yeah, so I'd love to start, if I may, responding to Scott's question about sustainability. So when we founded eKitabu in 2012 in Nairobi, the most kind of basic model that we have is as a distributor for local content developers, authors, and publishers. And that was really central to the way that we started. The need that we were responding to, that we saw first through our previous work in Kenya, was that there were a lot of computers, both that families were buying, and then that governments and donors were buying, and schools themselves were buying, and a lot of tech was going into schools. And then when we spoke with the local publishers, they said, well, you know, we haven't, why hasn't this connection been made? There's a gap here. There's a real opportunity to distribute this content into schools. That started us down a long road of developing, adding accessibility to that content, helping local publishers and authors and content developers digitize that work, make it accessible. And then we've developed a lot of programs to drive utilization and impact of that content, teacher training, and most importantly, in schools. But that was really the original model that's driven sustainability throughout, for both for our own business as well as for our partners who, you know, in the publishing and content development community that we distribute. And in terms of the countries we worked in, We've now worked in 13 countries. We have offices in the US, in Nairobi, and in Kigali, in Rwanda. So we have permanent teams there, but through partnerships, actually with a lot of US government projects, which I could talk about later, has really helped us scale to mostly East Africa. We've also done some work in Ghana and West Africa.
That's great. Thank you, Matt, for that background. And again, we're been thrilled to have the relationship with eKitabu over so many years with the great work on the countries you're in. Lisa, what about over to you, either in response to the provocative questions that Scott had, but give us a little bit more context about the specific type of work that Benetech does. We've been fans of Bookshare for many years, so you might want to mention that as well.
Sure, thanks, Tony. So as you mentioned, Benetech's a nonprofit, and we create software for social good. We do things other than Bookshare, but I am going to focus a little bit more on the Bookshare. We are the parent company for Bookshare. And what that is we're the largest digital library of accessible books. So we have millions of titles in our collection. We support up to 76 languages and provide access to books for people with print disabilities worldwide. And I'll get into what a print disability is in a minute. But when you ask, what are some of the countries that we've worked with, we have a presence in Europe and Africa and Asia, Asia Pacific, South America, and of course, North America, and have members in over 90 countries in the world. So I'm going to ask you to imagine something for a minute. And this is actually a good exercise because it helps people really understand who are the people that benefit from Bookshare. So if everyone out there can imagine holding a hard copy book in their hand, if you open that book, can you read the words? If you can't read those words, you're not reading that book. Can you actually hold that book and turn the page? Maybe you have a physical disability where you can't do that, for example. Then you're not reading that book. Or maybe you have a reading disability or a reading struggle where you can't actually understand what those words mean or decode what those words mean. You're not reading that book. So all of our books are available in a format that all the people that would fit in those categories of not reading that book meet, right? So imagine someone who's blind or visually impaired. They may want to read books by either hard copy Braille or digital Braille. They can also use large text. We can increase the font. If someone has a physical disability, that inhibits their ability to actually read a traditional printed book, they may access using audio, whether it's human narrated or whether it's computer generated, or maybe a student with dyslexia who struggles with decoding those words on the page. By having what we call karaoke style reading, which is really a highlighted text to speech, the person will see the word and hear the word at the exact same time. That essentially could speed up that decoding of that word and help them increase their comprehension of what they're actually reading. All of these books are available. All of our books are available in 5 different formats that include what I just described. And people can use these on their computers. They can use them on their tablets. They can use them on their phones. So we wanted to make sure that we were offering Bookshare in a way that the most people could actually access it. And so, Scott, to your point about equity, that's something that we think about quite a bit because we understand that technology may not reach all the different places in the world. So we work with other organizations to try to figure out how do we get those books into the hands of the people who need them the most.
Wow, Lisa, that's great. Thanks for the background and your amazing work that Benetech does globally. Sunan, would love to hear more about Enuma and some of the work that you guys have been engaged in.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So Enuma is a venture-backed, mission-driven company headquartered in Berkeley, California. So we are making high-quality game-based learning curriculum covering pre-kindergarten to 2nd grade skills. So in our case, we are focusing early childhood learning. So with the data, there are about 60% of children actually failed to achieve the basic literacy and math foundation skills. And most of those differences happen very early age from their resources, from their household condition, and so on. So we want to help all children just learn how to learn and how to read and write and doing math on their own with software's help. So we won the Global Learning X Prize competition in 2019 with application that helped children to learn basically reading, writing, math on their own. Our case, we are a for-profit company. We sell our B2C products Todo Math and Todo English through App Store around the world, mostly in families in East Asia. At the same time, we provide our impact products called KitKat School and Enuma School to NGOs and schools in developing countries. We are very active in Tanzania, Uganda, and Rohingya refugee camp in Bangladesh and Indonesia. We are making fully localized and contextualized game-based application for each language and culture. And we are expanding to other Southeast Asian countries and Latin American countries next year. We are headquartered in California, have offices in Korea and China, and we are expanding to Japan and Indonesia this year. So there is so many things to learn about U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunan. Yeah, that's terrific. Perfect, just in terms of linkages with Carrie, the program that you were just describing. So glad to be able to introduce you. Sunan, let's start with you, and then I'll ask Lisa and Matt. And we have a few rounds of questions, but we definitely want to make sure we have at least 10 minutes at the end just to open it up to answer questions to the audience. Sunan, this is probably a straightforward one to you. Can you tell us about a specific gamified feature of your applications? I know there are games, but tell us, give a little vignette for what a game looks like. And then Matt and Lisa, just to talk about where your initiatives sort of bridge into the gamification space as well. Sunan, let's start with you.
Yes, our software is designed by game developers. It is an array of tons of mini games. We use games in two different ways. So we are using game mechanics for children to just feel some of the fun for really basic interaction, like answering 1 + 2, or just to read the books. So the books or activities are interact with the touch. So children will just feel really simple short-term interaction when they are doing the activity of learning. But at the same time, we are applying more broad game mechanic to the system. So children can feel motivated and encouraged because there is an investment of their effort inside of the system in longer time. So we design actually a game application that have to engage with the users for months or years of time. And to build a motivation, we believe that it required really sophisticated game mechanics to build a self-directed motivation. And that's how we use game in our learning applications.
Thank you, Sunan. That's terrific. And if there are questions, again, from those that are participating for Sunan, please drop it in the chat. Matt, I'm going to go over to you. And eKitabu, what are gamified or game-related components to your initiatives?
Sure. I won't steal too much of Lisa's answer, so she can step on me if I from our rehearsal yesterday. So we started by digitizing books and have been adding interactivity to them, as I said, in a lot of cases with local content developers. And the approach that we've taken is really informed by Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, which, if you're not familiar with it, provides for multiple means of representation, engagement, and expression. So first, in representation, it's really about, as Lisa was saying, giving the people access to the content in a way that they want to engage with it, whether that's audio, sign language video. We don't do print braille so much, but we've done a lot of work with braille devices, with refreshable braille displays. So the first is the interactivity around representation and consuming the content. Engagement can be questions at the end of the book. And then expression comes through a lot in our programs, which aren't necessarily built into a book. But we, for the 9th year now, have run a digital essay competition where we ask learners to reflect on how technology, and specifically educational technology, is impacting their learning. So we really want to hear from them. And that can be art or poetry or a kind of classic essay, 2-page essay that they turn in, and we're very careful to give them feedback on those essays. So beyond, kind of the box of a tablet or a laptop, we really try to stretch out that engagement. So that's what we've been focused on. We're doing more and more of it. We're also very interested in the connection of how those questions and interactives can be used for some basic formative assessments. So for example, we've done a lot of work in Kenya and now Ethiopia around communication assessment for children who are deaf. Establishing a language, understanding a language is the first step towards literacy. If you haven't acquired a language, there's no way to become literate. And we've found a real gap around those formative assessments, particularly for children with disabilities. So that's been a big focus of ours right now.
Thanks, Matt. And Matt, getting to the point that gamification are means for engagement. So you're also talking about representing the voices of the young people themselves and co-creation process in terms of that's all about engaging the learner. Lisa, what about with Bookshare or Benetech? Are there some aspects of gamification that you'd like to highlight?
Sure. So Benetech has been known for developing a number of tools and standards to help access content beyond the word. So, getting the words in the book is easy, but what happens when you have charts and graphs and other things that, need descriptions or need input so that someone could fully comprehend what they're viewing. And so a number of years ago, we developed a tool called the Poet Image Description Tool, which helped. At the time, we thought it would be a great way to crowdsource alt text. So if you see a picture of a bird flying in a tree, and it's crucial to the content in the book, how do you describe that? And we, put together a way to kind of walk through, oh, this looks like a photo, or this looks like a chart, or this looks like a graph, you may need to do this, which has led us to a lot of the work that we're doing in third-party certification for publishers to support the creation of accessible documentation. So we want to also, go beyond our walls and help publishers also become accessible content providers. But on more of a, game like, how do the kids interact with Bookshare, that we're in the early stages in some of that. And so we've built some client-side API support so that we could connect. The foundation is built so that we could connect and pull some of these things. And so by no means hold me to what I'm about to say as an example, but just as an as if, how do we increase reading habits by gamifying things in a book? So for example, could we track a person's reading and maybe push messages to them that say, yesterday you read 5 pages, your goal for today is to read 10, and so we're exploring a lot of this. Like I said, don't hold me to this. My colleague's online and I haven't gotten a message from her yet saying that, no, don't say that. But we're just exploring the different opportunities. Now, when we talk about measurement and impact, at a later time, I'll also bring up, privacy and things like that, which could inhibit some of that gamification work as well. So we're really looking into that at this point to try to figure out what makes the most sense and what would be the most engaging for a student or for a reader to want to, keep going and build really that love for reading and learning.
Thanks, Lisa. And an important point, even for those that are watching this event as well, the examples from Sunan, Matt, and Lisa, how might your own organizations benefit from the expertise of the organizations that you've just heard of, including maybe there is a gamified component of an existing developer, but they want to have more information about universal design for learning. So for example, I've heard great examples from Lisa and Matt. And then Sunan, in terms of the work that you've done internationally in both developed and developing countries, sounds like a perfect sort of bridge opportunity, both for conversations with their colleagues, Carrie and Caroline, but also for other organizations that may be interested in taking their work international. So Lisa and Matt, you both preempted or suggested what the next question will be, which will be about monitoring and evaluation. So I appreciate you're both mentioning that as well. I'm curious how you track the measurement of the impact of your intervention, and maybe just a little vignette or case study example of who that client is and how you measure the progress. Sunan, I'm going to start with you. Basically, is how do you sort of track the impact of your software?
Oh, me again. So there is other great panel who actually worked in this field for a long time. We started to, so we have many different ways to track our users' progress. For impact products, so we called our KitKit school and Enuma school, that is targeting NGOs or schools and government are called impact products. We do two different things. We measure children's learning gain, definitely, with some of third-party measurement like EGRA and EGMA, and also compare our own digital measurement tools as pre-test and post-test. Sometimes we do randomized control tests for that. So that is one, but at the same time, we are collecting the qualitative data. So how easy it was for administrators and teachers, and how economically sounded it for NGOs and the funders. So recently, the latest report comes from Korea. We recently make a application, a game-based Korean language literacy for children from immigrant families to Korea, and collected a survey from parents and administrators of local districts about their satisfaction. It was really high because it was under the COVID-19 influence. So parents and administrators answer about their observation on children, and also the easiness of providing quality education for their learners. And at the same time, we ran we collected a learning gain from field test in Indonesia. It is through the traditional way of pre-test and post-test and measure the children. But at the same time, we are actually collecting all the interactions inside of game. So we have more detailed measurement, and when we use with the help of data scientists and latest machine learning, we just try to understand how children learn within our game. And also we just try to have more deep analysis about what these children achieve and what not achieve with the large number of data that can collect it from game interactions.
Sunan, that's terrific, thanks. And referencing standard sort of platforms or assessment tools like EGRA, EGMA, but also the benefits of just a digital way to capture assessment data through the game-based approach. Matt, what about, how do you guys measure your impact? And then Matt, when you're done, Lisa, you know it's going to be the same question coming to you, so we'll just go from Matt to you. Matt?
Sure. So we think of this as learning analytics, and I would say there's three big components of it. The first one is just measuring delivery, verifying that the content has reached the school, which is maybe obvious, but I think often overlooked. And I know USAID has done a lot of work in track and trace of, our books, our physical books showing up where they need to. So that's the foundation of it. The second piece is utilization. So as I said, kind of the founding inspiration for eKitabu was, is this content being utilized? And as Suan said, it's great with, apps and digital, you can track almost too much information. Understanding, are people using the books in a certain school? Are devices broken? So there's both kind of specific impact metrics that we can assess, as well as just, is technology being used in a school that it's been delivered to, which again, may seem obvious, but a lot of projects we find kind of don't, there's a lot of challenges to drive utilization of the content and the hardware that's been delivered to measure impact. And then the third piece of it is locally adapted and contextualized assessment tools. As I mentioned, we've done a lot of work with language and communication assessment. But just as Suan was saying, there's look, we know the app's been used, we know the books have been used, and then doing an evaluation before and after of the learning gains that have been driven, again, using these locally adapted assessment tools that we're working on.
And Tony, I'll just jump in because I think it's my turn. I keep feeling like I'm stepping on all your next questions, but a lot of our measurements and the way we measure impact is driven by our funders as well, right? So we report a lot of our information to our funders on a very regular basis, similar to Matt, as far as utilization, but how many books are in the collection, right? As that grows, that is a really important piece to show growth and impact. Also the number of students or the number of people using the product, whether it's statewide, countrywide, but being able to identify, are we growing and how are we growing? And then downloads is a big piece. So, how many people are reading books? What books are they reading? And, so they sound sort of trivial, but they're really, really important measures. They help us understand how we're doing. And like I said, we report these regularly. So currently Bookshare users download 1.6 million books a year. And in the US, we have 850,000 students. And so we report that to our funders so that they know that we're actually growing. But, looking at the way we capture metrics and data today, we're always wondering what should we be doing in the future? And, one of the things that has come up in a number of conversations is how do we track graduation rates or even employment success from people that have used our product? The problem with tracking both of those, however, is many of these studies are longitudinal, right? Like just because you download a book doesn't mean that you have instant success. So, that takes a lot of time and money to gather. And so we're looking to see how we can speed that up a little bit or how we could get a better sense of that. And then sometimes we have other funders who have specific criteria that they want us to look at. So, percentage of growth or number of problems solved for another product, not Bookshare. And so, we work with our funders to make sure that they're mutually agreed upon and that they're attainable and that they're trackable. And then, as I mentioned earlier in my last comment, privacy is an issue. So there's a lot of things that we can't share. We've signed a lot of privacy agreements with different organizations and states to say we won't share this data. So we have to be really careful of how we tread on that.
Thanks, Lisa. Makes a lot of sense. And of course, just Matt and Sunan talking about including the different metrics of performance. As you said, Lisa, it could be based on the funder expectations, and others are your own metrics for business growth, let alone tangible improvements in learning outcomes, which is noted that it is also longitudinal, and of which there's one intervention. How do you measure just the impact of that? Lisa, you mentioned in terms of funding from partner organizations. Just open up a question for you guys, maybe our last question before we open up for Q&A or questions of each other. And Sunan, I won't go to you first. I'll start with Matt or Lisa. Could you guys we'll go Matt, and then we'll go Lisa, then we'll go Sunan. Could you talk a little bit about your sources of international funding, or to be able to take your projects overseas? Matt, I'm thinking of the success that you've had as a multiple recipient of funding from the All Children Reading Grand Challenge, an initiative I was proud to be part of when I was at USAID for funding interesting innovations in terms of technology and early grade reading. Lisa, if I'm not mistaken, you guys have also been beneficiaries of All Children Reading activities in countries such as India. Could you elaborate just for a moment on this or other sources of USG funding, maybe just to provide by way of example for others that are interested in tapping into that, take their projects international? And then Sunan, if you'd like to talk about the Global Learning X Prize or some other source of funding that you want, maybe would recommend to folks, that'd be terrific as well, or just advice for folks that want to take their products overseas. Matt, let's start with you, then go to Lisa, then go to Sunan.
Sure. So Tony, I was thinking actually we met you through an introduction from the USAID team in Kenya. So this is a really good case study, I think, of building relationships with the fabulous people at the embassy, who then introduced us to you back in DC, which might be a bit of a backwards example, but I think it really speaks to the knowledge and expertise, in this case of Wick Powers, who's a tremendous USAID education officer, who's now in Egypt, I think. I know we have a colleague from Egypt in the chat. So that was really helpful. And then I can't say enough about both the challenges that were posed in the All Children Reading Challenge, which really both pushed us to increase the accessibility of our content and then provided funding to do that. So it was both, we've won 4 prizes from All Children Reading, which still amazes us. The second time we were like, well, yeah, they asked us, are we really going to win the second one? So thank you. And we're very humbled by the support we received. But that's done 2 really critical things. It's spurred us to innovate. and provided some funding to do that, and also helped us expand geographically. Going to Malawi, opening we already had an office in Rwanda, but it really expanded and deepened our work in Rwanda. And significantly, we've also partnered with other American companies. We're a really small business in the grand scheme of things. But we've been able to partner with much larger US companies that are able to prime, large scale US government contracts. And we've been a subcontractor to them, which I think was kind of explicit in your strategy for all children reading, kind of to spur our innovation and get us skilled up enough, to be successful as a subcontractor. And, maybe we'll prime a US government contract one day. But these are really big projects, multinational projects. And it's been really helpful also to partner with other US companies. We also work with companies like Microsoft, large American tech companies. And those have been great relationships also.
That's terrific. Lisa and Sunan, maybe let's keep your comments a little bit. Thank you, Matt. That's terrific. So we'll open it up and then or continue the conversation. Lisa, any specific recommendations for those who are hoping to go overseas?
Sure. So the bulk of our funding comes from the U.S. Department of Education, of Special Education Programming. And the work that the support we've gotten over the years from them has helped us build some of the foundational work that helps us expand internationally. So as we built the technology behind the platform, and we watermark books to make sure that they aren't able to be pirated, we expanded our international presence. And I think, Tony, I met All Children Reading when I first joined Benetech. And I think this is a really good example of how to expand internationally. There was a project in India where we needed to provide audio recordings in Marathi, and there is no text-to-speech engine for that. So this became the first time we had human audio narrated books in our collection. So the point I want to make is, you can go into work internationally with, are you a solution looking for a problem, or are you looking to solve a problem with your solution? And we had a solution, but it wasn't the right solution. And so being able to adapt and really meet the needs of the population we were serving gave us the opportunity to expand our work, but also really solve the problem. And that really opened up a lot of opportunities for us to be funded by USAID in India. And, we're even working on a project in Rwanda with eKitabu, right? So, a lot of partnering and a lot of just really trying to meet the needs of the group you're looking to work with, rather than coming in with a solution and shoehorning it in.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Sunan, a word of advice for folks?
So in our case, we are a for-profit company and received about 20 million investment from impact investors and financial investors so far. Especially the existence of impact investors were really crucial, as we try to balance between for-profit success to our mission. And we are recipient of the grand prize of Global Learning X Prize. We received $6 million through that. And we also received Korean government grant. We failed to SBIR, All Children Reading, other USAID grants so far. So we are looking for good luck next time. But also we are receiving the funding from private foundations. So for example, to build the version for Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, we got funding from private foundation, Imagine Worldwide, and IRC, International Rescue Committee. And to design our Indonesian version, we got 1 million grant from two Singapore-based foundation. And we receive additional grant for the wider distribution to local community right now for Indonesia. So but the most important funding source for us is revenue from our B2C market. We want to become a sustainable company, and we are building a really interesting learning engine that is applicable to any culture or any countries. So we are building revenue from developed countries market like Korea, Japan, China, or United States. And we just get some grants to localize it to children in immigrant families in Korea, or children in Indonesia or Malaysia, in Paraguay. So we don't, what it is, we are not picky about funding sources. Whatever it is happening, if it is award or investment or grant or whatever, we are really active. And we need to learn a lot from Matt and Lisa about how to access to all children reading and USAID grant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunan. Great examples. So now, Carrie, I'm going to turn it back just in general, and Scott, open it up and see if there's questions from our audience, and encourage people to drop those questions in the chat. Do we have questions for each other? Maybe just inviting those that are participants. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I think you could raise your hand, and that would let us know that you have a question as well. So while we're waiting for that, Matt, Lisa, Scott, Carrie, any question, Sunan, any questions for each other about what you've heard from your fellow colleagues?
Well, I have a question. I'm going to recap. It's like a bookend. I'm going to pull from one of my framing questions from the beginning. I'm really curious to know. I mean, you guys are doing all such great work, and I really appreciate you guys kind of sharing a bit more. I'm curious to know, since you have models that are responsive to your metrics and analytics when you implement, you know, the access and affordability piece. I've kind of wrestled with this personally with solutions that I rolled out that were on basic phones, initially Nokia phones about 10 years ago. I'm just wondering how you sort of take that into account. Is your implementation model responsive to the fact that there's, you know, what devices are people holding? Data, connectivity, sort of that whole bundle of, you know, the multi-dimensional bundle of access. How do you guys, as you roll out your solutions, sort of surf the choppy waters of some folks have intermittent connectivity, data might be too expensive for heavy multimedia downloads? Do you do offline content? Sorry, it's a bundle of thoughts, but I'm really curious to hear, since you guys are deep into metrics, how do you unpack that and how do you deliver considering those considerations?
So I'll just say quickly, for Bookshare books, they can be downloaded and used offline. So we understand that connectivity is an issue in the US and internationally, and wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity and an option for people to capture their books when they have that connectivity, and then use that time when they don't to read the books. So we do understand that. But we also understand that there are places that don't have as much technology as well. And so trying to partner or find partners with organizations that provide no to low cost technology is something that we're always looking for as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're always measuring cost effectiveness. And for us, you know, technology should be lowering costs, not just adding bells and whistles that are expensive. Mm-hmm. So the connection between impact, value for money, and cost effectiveness is just really critical for us. And I think it's really helped us innovate and lower costs. So that's, you know, if you're able to demonstrate that you can lower the cost, you know, I don't want to say it magically solves the problem, but that's, you know, if you're showing that it's cheaper than the present solution, it makes it by definition affordable.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I spent a lot of time pre the digital revolution, let's say, you know, the influx of digital devices, cheap mobile phones in Africa, where publishing costs are just prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
Worked a lot in the Sahel, worked a lot in Niger and Mali and Burkina, where the cost of printing was just exorbitant, and the publishing model was breaking down. So to your point, looking at how you can get greater returns and lower costs for digital products and textbooks. So that, you know, I think that is where what you're talking about, there's definitely potential.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, for that great question as well. You know, to wrap up just in time, just want to thank our panelists again, Sunan, Lisa, Matt. Carrie, I'm going to turn it over to you with just a last plug for those that are interested. One of the other fortunate vehicles that we have at the mEducation Alliance to meet folks from around the world is our annual symposia, which we've seen all of our presenters on multiple occasions. Our 2020 symposia on our website will be posted. The call for presentations is open now. It's going to be about foundational literacy and numeracy. So feel free to subscribe to our e-news. Carrie, back to you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for a great session. I think that was informative. Hopefully folks got a lot out of that. And I don't know if, Tony, do we have our contact info in the chat? Maybe we can put that in there for folks to reach us. But I just want to say thank you. I thought it was great session. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, and feel free to email either. I've dropped my email, Carrie, if you want to do the same as well. And we will be. This has been recorded. We will be posting this this interview on the mEducation Alliance website. Carrie, we could speak with you similarly about vehicles you'd have to access it. There you go. That's a wrap. And enjoy the rest of the Ed Games Expos for the folks that are participating. Bye-bye.
Thank you.